This week, a lot of my work has involved restorations, some of it arising from recent work and some of it in preparation for future work. And just like the weather this week, it's been a bit of a mix. The one constant has been the company of Billy, who has been watching my work carefully and also joined me for a couple of my favourite walks. There had been a big storm on Sunday night and it was still pretty fresh on Monday morning. After opening up, I checked out the surface of the wall that I was working on last week. Then I got set up for some work outside, cleaning up some of the bricks that I had laid out last week. These are the bricks from the old stairs wall that I took down a few weeks ago, and most of them had a lot of mortar on them, and some had a layer of plaster, and some had cement. After an hour of work, it was time for a break. Some attention to Billy, and then I was reminding him of his duties at the main entrance and the front door, and testing out a jacket for when others are on site, kindly sent to us by Jim and Anna, who were also responsible for Billy's personalised food bowl. Then it was back to work and cleaning the bricks that had the most material on them. And with the initial cleaning with the grinder almost complete, it was time for some lunch. First for Billy, and then for me. Then it was time for giving Billy some exercise, with a lunchtime walk on a forest track, heading up the hill on the horizon behind me now. This is one of my favourite walks, and at the top there is a different view of the house that I really like. While admiring the view, I was dive-bombed by one of my favourite butterflies, the two-tailed pasha, which kindly took a break on some leaves so that I could take a closer look. Billy was slightly less interested, so we then headed back down the hill to the house. And once there, I returned to brush down the last bricks in the pile. And then laying them out so that I could remove the mortar with a weak acid wash. Then for a final clean, I moved the bricks to a sheet where there would be more space and I could use the power washer more effectively. I did a bit of a tidy up while I let the bricks dry out. And Billy put into practice some of his lessons from earlier in the day when a dog walker passed by. I was pretty pleased with the way the bricks had cleaned up. And I then moved all 90 of them inside where I intend to reuse them in the future. And with the bricks stacked up, it was time to head home. The next day was a bit brighter and warmer, and my plan was for more work outside. First, I needed to clear a bit of a path. And then I needed to move my scaffolding back to the house. And up to the lowest outside wall on the church side. Where I wanted to do some work on the old cornice, which I hadn't previously cleaned. The cornice wraps around 3 of the main walls in what I think is called a classical style. It has a lime render on top of rows of bricks and tiles. A lot of the render has either deteriorated or is very dirty, and there are visible cracks in some of the bricks and the render. So I want to take the render off to check the state of the underlying structure, so that I can decide how much of it might be recoverable and how much work might be needed to do that. To start with, I cleared the render by hand so that I could be more careful and check the exact size and shape of the underlying brickwork. And then when I had a better idea of the pattern and the thickness of the render, I set up the generator so that I could use some power tools. Both the grinder with the metal brush for the final layers of render, and the power chisel to take off as much render as possible from the surface. After a short break for a drink, and a chicken stick for Billy, I was back for some final cleaning of the section I had worked on. Including some brushing by hand, and cleaning off the surface mortar with a weak acid wash. I had a couple of visitors during the day and I hadn't made as much progress on the cornice as I had hoped, and because I didn't want to leave the scaffolding out overnight, I finished the cleaning work and got on with taking down the scaffolding as quickly as possible. And then taking it back inside. One reason for taking the scaffolding down was that I wouldn't be back until lunchtime the next day, as I had some commitments off-site later in the morning. But I was more free early in the morning, and I wanted to give Billy some better exercise. So the next morning, we headed to the nearest part of the coast, and a walk along a stretch of the Costa Brava that I think is one of the most beautiful. There is a path along most of the coast in this area that is called the Camino de Ronda. And this part leads to a beach called San Pol that I visited with Billy in a video a few weeks back. This path is very popular throughout the year, and it's best to go early in the morning, especially to be able to enjoy each of the viewing points along the path. There are houses along this stretch of the coast, but the path runs right along the waterfront, around a number of calas and some quite steep cliffs in some parts. Although the local fishing industry is not as big as it once was, there is still a range of fishing boats out most days. But I'm not sure what this one was catching to attract all the seagulls. The final stretch heads into San Pol and the beach I visited before. And after returning to my car, I went to my other commitments, before heading back to the house later in the day. Because I had less time to set up the scaffolding, I didn't return to the cornice work. And to start with, I headed into the salon to do some work on the vault edges. where there are still a number of patches of old plaster that I hadn't previously removed. And having finished other wall work in here over the last months, I now wanted to clear it down. Like in the smaller section here that the builders cleared a few months ago when rebuilding the wall. To avoid breaking any of the vault tiles, I needed to remove the plaster relatively accurately, so it was best to do it by hand rather than with any machines. Although this was a lot slower and a lot more tiring. Having taken off most of the plaster, I had a break. And then moved back outside to clear an area outside the shed to make it easier to move things out of the shed in the coming weeks. When I started to move the empty water deposit, I got stung by 2 very angry wasps. So I then removed the cover in a rather overcautious way. Before discovering a very small wasp nest on the top. And with the water deposit out of the way, I moved various pieces of rubble. And then I could clear the grass in this area with the strimmer. And with the area cleared, I finished my work for the day. The next day I started relatively early and set up the generator and scaffolding as quickly as possible to continue my work cleaning the cornice. And with the scaffolding up, I returned to the process of chiseling, brushing and washing. Occasionally enjoying the view, and then carefully rolling the scaffolding onto the next section. The actual cleaning work was relatively quick, but working at heights and climbing up ladders the whole time adds a lot of time. And it was already lunchtime, even though I had only cleared a couple of sections. After lunch, I did head upstairs briefly to set up a bit of an experiment, which I hope to be able to tell you about in a few weeks' time, before heading back to the cornice work, with more brick washing, and more scaffolding rolling. I then had a final break before pushing hard to finish the work on the cornice on this wall. And although I got close, I had to stop just before I'd completed the cleaning to give myself enough time to get the scaffolding down and back inside, and then to leave before another storm was due to roll in and it got dark. Because I didn't quite finish the cornice work, I needed to return the next day for a bit more work. But first I checked my experiment upstairs. Tidied up a bit where I had dumped things the evening before in a hurry. And then headed outside, this time with just the ladder. It still took a bit of time to set up and secure. But I was then able to quickly use the grinder and metal brush for the last bits of the cornice. Billy had stayed inside the gate for this work, but when I finished, he was keen for a bit of a play. And then there was one final, albeit slightly quicker, tidy up and putting away. And that is the end of my work for the week. And the work out here at the start of it seems like quite a long time ago. And although there are less bricks here, there's still a lot of tidying up to do. Just as there is in this space, which I've once again managed to fill up with more things, including a good pile of cleaned up old bricks, which I'm planning on reusing on the wall edges on this doorway. While in this room, the vault edges are a good deal tidier after I chip the plaster off the edges of them, but I'll still need to do some more careful brushing and cleaning on certain parts. And there'll be more tidying up to do in the shed below, which will be a bit easier after I cleared in front of it, so long as there aren't too many wasps. And I'll also have to do some more work on the other side of this wall, where I've cleared most of the old lime render off the old brick cornice. So it'll now be a good deal easier to review the future options for the cornice with my architect and the builder. And finally, here is a message from my goddaughter in America. Hi Petal, Billy and I wanted to wish you a very happy 9th birthday. The last few weeks I know have been quite hard for you, but I understand that you've been very brave during the operations, and I hope that you're able to have a very good birthday. I hope to see you soon, but for now, we're sending you lots of love from Spain.